Daisy Link is a Florida woman. She was charged with second-degree murder in the 2022 killing of her husband, Pedro Jimenez. Prosecutors said Daisy fired out of rage while Jimenez was running away in fear for his life, but the defense offered testimony that Daisy shot Pedro in self-defense. The jury clearly didn't buy that. We're going to get into it, and I'm going to have to start, of course, with Mark Eiglarz because he is there in Florida. This is his backyard, Mark. But before we do that, I want to take a look and listen to SOT 1, which is testimony that the jury did not buy, which was Daisy testifying about this shooting and what her intent was at the time.
He told me that he was gonna lock me out of the house and that I was gonna sleep outside. When I began to walk towards him and I said, "No, you're not, you're gonna leave." He said, "I don't give a fuck, bitch, I'm ready to die, you could kill me." And he began to run towards the house.
And what did you do when you see him running towards the house to lock you out?
I took the shot.
Were you aiming to hit him?
I initially aimed towards the floor as I lifted up the gun. I didn't expect for it to hit him. I just thought the sound was gonna scare him off this time for good.
Mark, investigators said they identified an atypical pattern of domestic violence in the relationship, atypical in the sense that it's the female being the aggressor. There was a 911 call 5 days before the shooting, which documented Link's attack on Jimenez with a skateboard, Mark, while he was inside his vehicle attempting to flee. So this is your backyard. You know a lot of the players involved down there. Help us understand this case and what's going on and what's just happened.
Yeah, it's real simple. 90 minutes. That's how long it took for the jury to deliberate. You take away bathroom breaks, you take away how long it takes to pick a foreperson. There's not much time left. It was very clear to them that her self-defense claim was bogus. The charge was second-degree murder. So they have to show that she had a depraved heart, which means it was a willful and wanton disregard of human life or property. Her own testimony, if you believe it, supported that claim. Shooting a gun at someone running away down at their feet, assuming that's really where you were aiming, is a reckless disregard for human life or property. Another way to say it is, if somehow they were to acquit this conduct, that means anyone under like circumstances can shoot down at somebody's legs, and if that bullet ricochets and hits a child, well, that person shouldn't be held criminally responsible because they were justified in the shooting. No. Call 911, do something else. I think the jury got it right.
Well, actually, Link's defense contended that Jimenez was the aggressor, having beaten her with a gun days before this final confrontation. They also alleged that the defense did that Jimenez fired a shot at Link in front of children. And prosecutors said that when Link initially contacted the police after the shooting, she admitted actually to being the aggressor in the argument, but stated that she merely wanted to scare the victim. But we have some video. We have some video of what happened, I guess, right after the shooting. Let's go ahead and roll SOT 2, and I want to speak with you, Ashley, about this.
I thought you hit a major artery. You'll be fine.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. I mean, that's kind of cold, right? When you see someone shooting down someone. And by the way, this is the jury believed that she was the aggressor and she was the woman who was doing all the battering in this relationship. So what have you ever seen like a case that has this kind of video where she's literally telling someone you'll be fine as they're laying there bleeding out?
Unfortunately, that reminds me of a case I had where my client actually was on the 911 call saying, "I'm going to get you, bitch." And then you hear the fire go off, the fire, the shotgun go off.
You got on probation, I'm sure.
I'm sure, yeah.
You're that good.
This is what I would like to call an imperfect self-defense case. You know, they're arguing self-defense because what else are they going to argue? But really what they're trying to argue, this is a public service shooting. This is a guy that was a jerk and he was an abuser and, you know, he deserved to be shot at. I think that's kind of what they were trying to argue. The problem is, if you looked at her, that first shot you played, she is not likable. She is not sympathetic. And when you've got a case of imperfect self-defense, when you've got something where you want the jury to essentially what we call nullify, you want them to say, well, you know, it doesn't really fit self-defense 100%, but we're going to give her a pass anyway. She needs to be up there and she needs to look sympathetic. She needs to look like she is a good person, a good mother, a good human being, not someone who is right up in there, throwing the punches right back with him. She had her son testify. I don't know if that backfired on her. I mean, I can tell you, I'm sure there's moms on that jury. As a mom myself, I don't love it when you put your kid up there and you try to use your child to help you out. That just kind of probably rubbed some of the jurors the wrong way. And, the judge had an opportunity at first, and this is what happens in all jurisdictions. We have these stand your ground laws. So the judge has the opportunity at first to determine whether or not they believe there was self-defense. And if there isn't, then it goes to the jury. Well, you're really using that at this point, not to win on self-defense, but to get what I call jury nullification, that public service shooting. And she really needed to be a whole lot more likable for that to work.
Well, speaking of likable, right? So the prosecutors were able to bring in evidence in this case that Link lied to 911 about the identities of the folks involved, and there was a 10-minute wait and all this stuff. It's almost like you can see this person who is trying to. Now, there's no, the victim, of course, is dead and can't refute any of this, and it's almost like she's weaving this fake story using some bits of truth and maybe certain things that are fabricated to try to put a square peg in a round hole. It's almost like the battered spouse type of defense, right? But it doesn't exactly fit that. It doesn't exactly fit traditional self-defense in that, she was, somebody pulled a gun on her and she was firing back in self-defense. It wasn't any of those kinds of things either. And then to bring in the son, who is Pedro Jr., to say, that he saw his father previously shoot at his mother. Yeah. And that he also said that he was there testifying to, quote, get his mom out of jail or something like that, right? Yeah,
so when you put all
this together, when you put all this together, you've got a jury that just is probably not liking any of this, not buying what the defense is selling one bit, Mark.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you guys have said. The 911 call, they waited 10 minutes as the guy's bleeding out. That shows a reckless indifference to human life. Also, the cross-examination, the prosecutor was able to say, and you lied to this person, and then you lied to this person. All the lying she did shows consciousness of guilt. And the final thing is, I'm sure that the prosecutor focused on the I word, imminent. In other words, you cannot use deadly force unless what you fear is imminent. So maybe they proved that there had been domestic violence in the past, maybe as recent as that morning. But jurors are supposed to focus, as they did, what occurred right when she pulled the trigger. Was she facing imminent death or great bodily harm? And the answer is, as he's running and she's firing at him, by her own statements, that's not what occurred.
Well, Ashley, we all have to decide when we try these cases whether we're going to have the client testify. But it's not really the lawyer's decision. It's ultimately the client's decision. Yes. And we'll never know what the conversation was like between her and her counsel. But I've got to wonder about the decision to have her testify when the entire defense is going to hang on her credibility at that point. Before she testifies, it hangs on the credibility of the state's evidence. But when a defendant takes the stand and opens their mouth, suddenly their credibility is what the trial literally hangs on. And so if you have evidence that she's lied during the investigation, that just doesn't bode well, does it, for having your client testify?
No, not at all. And I'm one of those lawyers, where I want to put my client up if I can. I think the jury wants to hear from them. Clients want to speak. They should be able to tell their truth. This is one of those situations where when I watched her testify, I just cringed because she is not helping herself. I mean, definitely, and I'm a true defense lawyer. So I'm looking at it like, are you able to put this through? Are you able to make this sympathetic to the jury? I think if she had gotten up there and she had looked like a battered spouse, if you felt bad for her, you didn't feel bad for her at all when she's on the stand. I mean, she 100% blew it. And I do kind of feel for those defense lawyers because a lot of times, we guide our clients to the right decision, but they may not always make the right decision. And this is one of those decisions that is 100% a client's decision, whether or not they want to testify. I mean, I can do everything in my power, and I have done everything in my power to sway that decision one way or another. But ultimately, it's their choice. And, sometimes I'll tell my client, and I imagine the defense lawyer probably said this, this is your case to lose when you get up there. And I think she lost it.
Ashley, I'm shocked. Wait, Phil, I want to know what your thoughts are too, where you stand. I'm the opposite of Ashley. The last thing I want to do is put my client up there. A fish who kept his mouth shut never got caught. They're not subjected to cross-examination. Most don't look well, and it's literally like a Hail Mary. I understand why they had to do it here. Self-defense case, most of the time you got to do it. Phil, where do you stand? You in the eyeglass?
I'm like
case?
50-50.
Because
It really
I
just-
represent only innocent people.
It depends on the facts of the case, but I have one of the most spectacular losses in my career was a trial that I didn't think that I should lose. But once the client decided to testify, it kind of went south. So look, you've been burned a few times. You're very, very cautious about doing it. But look, the jury has spoken guilty on all counts. And so we're going to leave it there for the trial itself. But there's more to this case that we've got to get into before we move on to Amy Bradley. No, we got to get to Amy Bradley. So here's the thing. There's an interesting side story to this case, right? She got pregnant, guys, while she was in jail. And she was in the women's part. There was no commingling of the genders or the sexes in the jail where she was, but she got pregnant and she gave birth while she was in jail. And to explain it all, we have some video. So let's go ahead and roll SOT 3 and check that out.
It's a real twist. It is. Everybody says it to me. This is like some Lifetime movie network.
The DNA results show inmate number 200147865, Joanne DePaz, is the baby's father.
This call is from the Miami-Dade Metro West Detention Center.
So you guys have never physically touched each other?
Never. Like the Virgin Mary.
The big question here is, how did this happen?
Through the vent.
I put the semen in a saran wrap every day, like 5 times a day for like a month straight.
He would kind of like roll it up, almost like a cigarette, and he would attach it to the line that we had in the vent, and I would pull it through. From there, I had placed it inside of, it was, the yeast infection, the yeast infection applicators. I had placed it inside of there, and then from there, I administered it.
All right, so I'll probably never say the words semen, saran wrap, yeast infection applicator again on air. Never.
I won my bet.
Now, that's what we're talking about. So I've got to find out, is this, Mark, what commonly happens in the jail down there in Miami where you are?
No. And just so we're clear, I wanted them to know about what she's facing, so they need to keep an eye on her for the next 25-year minimum mandatory up to life here in Florida, because the jurors found specifically that she used a firearm and she discharged it under our 1020 life law. She'll now be in prison for a minimum of 25 years, minimum mandatory, day for day, no parole, no time off, so 25 years up. And they need to keep an eye on her to make sure she has no more conjugal connections without conjugal
it's not like
visits.
a conjugal visit.
Okay?
It's a through the vent thing.
Yes.
Right?
Well, somehow, listen, I'm embarrassed. That's my jail. This is my local jail, and his baby batter is swimming through vents. That cannot happen. That should never happen. Somebody should be under investigation for this. The same way they're passing that substance through the vents, they could be passing other stuff, and they likely are. That needs to come to an end, and someone needs to be held responsible.
Mark, do they share, do the women pod join the men's pod? I mean, this is crazy. Are they all there together?
I never thought that. And the answer is no. They're on different floors, apparently, but the vents were connected. That cannot happen anymore. They moved him to Metro West, a much further, different jail from her, but he'll find a way through pigeons. This is outrageous.
Well, and I wonder if other inmates are
we-
going to do this.
Yeah, we kind of laugh about this a little bit because it is so outrageous, but it's really also kind of sad. And Mark, you talked about this some before air. I mean, look, this is a human being that was brought into this world under the most horrible circumstances. And actually, what do you think is likely to happen with this child, with this baby now that's been born, who's father, I guess, was locked up for murder. Mom's now been convicted of murder, brought into the world under the most egregious of circumstances. And it wasn't like people that were in love with each other and wanted to make a family and this sort of thing. This was, she did this so that she thought it was her ticket out of jail. Actually, how is that baby going to be raised now?
Well, you've got two parents both in jail for murder. So, typically you would go into Child Protective Services, somewhere in foster care. But both of these people have parents. And so this lady, Daisy's mom, is probably going to be raising this child, which gives me a little bit of pause because she raised Daisy. And this guy was raised by his parents. And I'm not saying that they're responsible for their children, but I'm saying maybe they aren't the best parents ever to raise this poor little child. But the problem is with our system, it's going to go to the next. It's called fictive kin, the next kin. It's going to go to a grandparent. It's going to go to a sibling, something like that. And they're going to be the ones that raise this poor little
I
kid.
understood that it was his parents who are raising the child right now. That doesn't make me feel any better. I can imagine the day where she innocently says, the child says, tell me about how I was conceived, mommy and daddy, and has to hear this pathetic story. But Phil wasn't speculating, by the way. I saw the footage of her speaking with her mother, Daisy speaking with the mother, and saying that she got pregnant so that then the judge and the system will take pity on her and she'll be able to get out. That is the most selfish act that a human being can engage in, with such sad consequences, that this child came from that selfishness. It really troubles me. And again, someone is responsible for this.
Yeah, so News Nation reported on this, and we have the quote pulled from courtesy of News Nation. This is a quote. Link said, quote, "I'm going to sue them and get out," referring to the county and the police. You know how much I can sue them for? She said, "This is all planned. I can get out now." And then her mother responded, "You know what? You're stupid." And her mother's right, because this was not only stupid, this was awful. It was a horrific thing to do to this child. To bring the child into the world under those circumstances is just ridiculous to me.